excited to be here with my good friend Chris Goodenough. Yes, that is Goodenough. Cool last name, cool guy, director, cinematographer out of Eastern Connecticut, and also former Coast Guard member. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Absolutely.
And a father. So we got some interesting things that we could talk about, I think.
Sure.
But yeah, so start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, Chris. Where'd you start off, and what got you on the path you're on right now?
Well, I've been writing all my life. I remember going to a yard sale with my mom when I was, just a little kid. And, all the other kids at the yard sale were snatching up toys and stuff. And I saw a typewriter, a good old-fashioned Royal typewriter. And I said, Mom, I want that. She's like, you want a typewriter? Yeah. It was $5. I remember that. And she took it out of my allowance and she bought me a typewriter. And ever since that day, I've been banging away at the keys trying to say stuff.
That's really funny, actually, too, because obviously we come from different generations, but I actually got started on a typewriter, too. I remember when I was a kid, similar story, went to a yard sale with my mom, and I saw this typewriter, and I was like, oh, that looks so cool. And obviously we had computers, but for me, something about it seemed organic, and like the fact that you could type it, and you didn't have to go through the next process of printing it. You could just pull the paper off, and it was there,
Right.
I liked that for some reason as a kid. So that's pretty cool.
I remember also as a kid reading comic books. That
Okay.
was my escape, was going into comic books. And I'd read them and I'd be like, that's not how I would say it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be changing the dialogue in the comic books, taking out a little ere and rewriting the lines of the, Spider-Man and Batman. And
Were those like your go-tos, or did you have any specific comics that like really you were drawn to? You know what I mean? Was there any specific comic books that like you really were inspired by in the beginning?
I liked the X-Men.
X-Men.
I
awesome.
know X-Men is like everybody's favorite, but I really dug Wolverine. I thought he was a dark character,
Mm-hmm.
and he had substance to him. All the other ones, they could do this, could do that, but he was just...
Especially because, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's like not new, obviously, but later in like the comics series he's like later on, like then say like Batman, Spider-Man comics and
Right.
stuff like that, right? So it makes sense that they were kind of gearing towards that more gritty side of what a superhero could be. And I don't know anything about the original comics though. If the style of who Wolverine is changed at all, or
No, actually, he's been tried and true. In the movies, the Wolverine movies, they did a really good job of keeping the character true to the comics.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I feel like that's something that's happened too. You'll see, like, obviously, the biggest one I think we can all point out is Batman.
Oh yeah,
Batman, you go from, what was his name? Adam West, that played him back in the, the 50s, 60s time frame, right? I think that around that time.
right, yeah.
And like, obviously, those Batman shows and movies were completely different than what we see in Batman today, like, especially with the most recent one with Robert Pattinson. Like, totally different twist on it, just because the world is kind of changing. We look at things a little differently, especially in film.
Right. It's interesting because Batman was originally written dark. He was a young kid that saw his parents gunned down in an alleyway and decided to take revenge on all the bad guys. That was, back in the 40s, 50s?
Mm-hmm.
And Batman was a vigilante. There hadn't been any vigilantes as far as comic books went.
No, that's true. And I don't even know if they're, like, obviously, I don't know if all superheroes are even considered vigilante, but they are, right? In a sense.
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah.
They're above the law.
Exactly. No, but, so, getting back on the topic of you and, obviously, so you're retired and now
I
you're
am.
kind of moving your focus into doing this cinematography and stuff with your company Outtakes Pictures.
Right.
Is it Outtake or Outtakes?
Outtake.
No S. But Outtake Pictures, you're doing this this cool stuff, and I think, not to knock on your age, but obviously you're a retired man, so
Sure.
it's like at this stage, a lot of people, I think, are afraid to step into their passions at that age, and in some way they might resort back to, wanting to relax and chill and go, vacationing.
Go fishing, play golf.
Exactly. But you're like breaking that stereotype, which is one of the things I admire about you. That you're not like saying you and Bill Thibault too. It's this or Tebow.
Tebow.
Bill Tebow. I never could pronounce it right. But Bill Tebow, same thing. You guys are couple of young spry chickens, pretty much,
Yeah.
in this game, but you're pushing yourselves to do it, and I love seeing that.
Well, like I said, I've always been a writer.
Yep.
So, all through my military career, I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And once I retired, writing was my thing. I even when I got jobs out in the civilian sector,
Mm-hmm.
I'd come home and I'd bang out a short story here or a short play there. It's just my retirement.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that is like a message that a lot of people really could use, is that you can do it any age you are. It doesn't matter where you are in your life. You have the ability to do that, and you choosing that as your retirement. Maybe somebody else will choose something like that just from watching this podcast. They're like, I really always wanted to make music.
Oh,
So they
yeah.
just go book a session at the studio, and then they start recording some music, or whatever it is. That's like something I really was excited to have you on for, is like, I think I see too many people, they get older and they kind of, obviously naturally life takes your energy and it slows you down a little bit. But I think some people settle into that and get comfortable with that. And I feel like that's something about you is cool, is you don't seem like you want to get comfortable. You want to keep doing your thing until you can't,
Well, I think it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are people out there that accept their age. People that are 60, 70, 80 years old, they start thinking, well, I'm 60, 70, 80 years old. In my mind, I'm still 20.
That's awesome.
We were filming a short film in the woods one night, and we needed to put lighting up in the trees.
What one was that? Was that the
That was The Last American Vampire.
Last American Vampire that's still not out yet, right?
Oh, but there's an update to that.
Oh, we're going to have to hear about that.
Yeah,
'Cause this
very
was a project
excited.
that you seemed very near and dear to, and you guys had a full team, really put a lot of work into it,
Yep.
building sets and design and costumes and
Props
getting
and-
access to cool places to use for sets. No, but moving on from that, I wanted to talk a little bit. Obviously, we know now that you started off as a writer, and
Right.
that was your real thing. So at what point in your writing career were you like, I'd love to see my writing put into film?
Well, it's funny how that happened. T, a very dear friend of mine, he was an actor. He always wanted to be an actor. He'd done stage work and everything. And when we first got together, it was the same thing. He was practicing his lines, and me being a writer was like, I wouldn't say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to the point where I was kind of like his acting coach.
Yep.
We'd do lines, and I'd tell him, no, that doesn't work. Try saying it this way. And we got very comfortable with that. He did a play in Hartford, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yep.
And when he was done, as with a lot of actors, when you get done with a performance, you get what I call post-performance depression, where you don't know what to do with yourself. You've been pushing yourself for these last few months to get this project, and then it's all over. And so we were sitting at work, and I said, well, what do you want to do next? And I had just finished writing Gray Man, my short film, or my pilot for TV series. He said, why don't we do that? And up to this point, I was just a writer. And I said, okay, how do we do that? So I went on to his Facebook page, and I invited all his friends that were in acting and stage, and then I went into his friends' Facebook pages and invited all them friends. And I slowly went from having 34 friends on Facebook to having 5,000 friends on Facebook. But it was a case of having people that were all in the industry, writers, producers, directors. So whenever I got stuck on how to do something, I'd throw a question out on Facebook, and I'd get 200 answers. And then I'd look at the answers, and sure enough, there would be a recurring theme in there, and that's the one I went with.
So, it's cool that you're talking about how you built your network. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because it's something I've always noticed too, since I've known you, is that, you have a pretty good network of people, not only specifically just a network of people, but a network of people within the film industry, whether it's, a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. You seem like you have a good reach for that. So was it strictly like through social media you were able to grow that, or was there other opportunities that you've come across in your experience that got you close to the right people?
Well, one thing I learned from doing Gray Man is there is a plethora of talent here in Eastern Connecticut. People might think that we're the quiet corner, we're the sleepy corner, and I am adamant that that's not true. I think that there is a huge pool of talent here in Eastern Connecticut. And what I try to do is I try to get involved with other people's projects. They might not need a writer or a director. That's fine. Let me come on and do your sound for you. Let me come on and do your lighting for you. Because then I can see how they work. So it not only builds the knowledge that I have for producing films, but it also creates this network of people so that later on, when I need a cinematographer, I can go, hey, remember the 3 times I helped you out? I need you for half a day to help me film this. And, people come on board.
Yeah.
Especially when you're, low to zero budget making movies. You got to depend on friends and family to
And
help
bartering.
You
You know, like you said, I gave you some of my time. Is there any chance you could give me some of yours?
Exactly.
And I think that I see that personally, in because obviously my main work is I run my video company too.
Right.
So it's like I've seen that, even just having that skill of some sort that you can barter for another skill. Like last year, I wanted a trainer, so I got connected with one of my good friends, now good friends, Steven Shivandire, and super talented guy, really bulky guy, trainer.
Yep.
And, I went to him and I was like, hey, man, I'd love it if we could maybe trade. And so I started working with him to produce some content, and in exchange, he was giving me less training sessions and whatnot.
Right.
So, you can find so much value by having a skill like this, or really any skill. I think you can, if you're just willing to ask, hey, you willing to trade?
Exactly.
Because if sometimes we don't, especially, I was going to say, one reason I think this quiet corner of Connecticut that we're in has this pool of talent is that we are in a state that is demographically like lower, a lot more, very high poverty rates and middle to low class,
Right.
So I think struggle
in this section of the state.
especially in this section of the state.
Yeah, when you go towards New York, it gets a little bit higher up.
Yeah, it does. But even like you go into a city like Hartford, and you really do see that divide of the classes. And I think people in struggle, or even in semi amounts of struggle, whether it's low class or middle class, wherever you're sitting, there's a lot of struggle going on in there, especially currently with what's going on with the economy, obviously.
Right.
But struggle, I think, breeds creativity,
Oh, sure.
And like it's funny, like the artists that I've had on so far, I've had a couple of musicians on, and a couple of my other friends that are musicians have said the same thing. It's easier to write from a dark place or from a sad experience than it is to write about something happy. And right now you've been delving, we just did that little comedy video recently together. And it's like I could tell that was you were delving into comedy, which is like a different place to come from. You kind of have to come, maybe there's some dark humor and things, but you kind of still have to come from a more light and positive place in order to create something like that.
Right. For me, comedy is the hardest thing to write.
It is. It's the biggest challenge I think with making a comedy film especially is timing. Timing and taking advantage of set pieces. I was actually recently just trying to dissect some, even some Adam Sandler movies and stuff. And something I noticed that they do for comedic emphasis, it's subtle, but having those little detail shots, for example, with the film we had, the only thing that I wish that we had got, after I watched it, was there's a part where I'm hammering the nail, obviously, right? And I wish we had gotten a shot that was close up on the nail being hit upside down.
Yep.
Because I think that would have made the comedy of it a little bit more apparent. You know what I mean? Whereas when you see it from that wide angle, you can't necessarily tell that the nail's upside down.
Right.
You can't tell how I'm hitting it wrong. I'm hitting it weird, maybe holding the front end of the hammer. But that's something I noticed too when I was watching some Adam Sandler flicks and some other comedy movies, is they'll take advantage of the environment that their characters are in to create that little sense of comedy. And that kind of dates back to the old silent films,
Yep.
where it's a piano drops on you from the sky.
Right.
That's using, obviously they would use a wide angle shot just because that was what they would do a lot of times. They'd set up a camera and just run it, but still using the environment and set pieces to create the comedy. and not just relying on the people talking, you know?
Right.
But that's also fallen in like slapstick almost too when you go down that route. So it really depends on what kind of comedy you're trying to approach.
Right. Well, I found that with most projects that you do, you always wish you could go back and do something different. Aaron Sorkin was famous for writing The West Wing. And after watching the first season, he wanted to go back and rewrite the entire first season. Aaron Sorkin is a Academy Award winner, Emmy Award winner. He's a phenomenal writer, and most of the movies that he writes, skyrocket as far as
Popularity.
Yeah.
Yep. Notoriety.
So, even the best guys want to go back and redo. And, I watched the videos that we've done recently, and it's like, I wish I'd said that differently, or I wish
that's how I feel even, like, watching it back, like, obviously I told you when we went into that day that I was method acting, I was trying to play a stoner, so I smoked a joint before we shot the film.
That works.
And, I think looking back, though, I kind of wish I hadn't, because I think I went a little too big, and because of that, I even watch it, and I'm like, I could have done that so much better.
Yep.
But, it's like you have to try things. Sometimes you just got to try and let yourself fail. And
Right.
like when you're an artist, especially, obviously, like you just said, artists are their own biggest critic. No matter what level you are, Channing Tatum is his own biggest critic probably just as much as I am as an actor or
Right.
I am as a musician and Ed Sheeran is, Any musician or artist or creator is always going to critique themselves more than the world sometimes. Sometimes the world doesn't even see what you did,
And that's what I use these short films for, especially right now that we're, trying to grow the whole Eastern Connecticut thing, is they're not necessarily meant to be Academy Award winning movies. They're more to be tools where the actors can come on and they can work on their talents, and the writers can come on, they can work on their talents, and you can improve the process. So the farther we go into this, the better quality we're going to be producing.
So now, obviously your goal is to do this big, build this company that is offering, smaller people an opportunity. But I'm curious what your why is. What is your why?
Two words for you. Taylor Sheridan.
Taylor Sheridan. Explain.
Taylor Sheridan is the writer of Yellowstone. I don't know, the people that are watching.
Give us a little synopsis on the movie for anybody that doesn't know, because I personally have never heard of Yellowstone, but I'd love to know a little bit more about it.
Yellowstone stars Kevin Costner. He is a ranch owner in Montana, and it's all about his family and how their lives are affected by this ranch. And it's a TV series. It's going into its fifth or sixth season.
Oh, okay, so it's currently airing.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's just phenomenal writing. But a lot of people can go and write a good series. Taylor Sheridan is the man because he brings an entourage of people with him in whatever he does. If you go back and you look at his movies and his TV shows that he's written, there are recurring actors that play different roles in all his shows.
Much like Quentin Tarantino does.
So he has a pool of actors that he can dig into. I need a police sheriff. I'm going to go with this guy. I need a convict. I'm going to go with this guy. And he's worked with them before, so they know his process and he knows their abilities.
And their process, definitely.
He goes deeper. Taylor Sheridan is also writing The Four Sixes, which is a spin-off from Yellowstone. In it, it takes place on one of the biggest ranches in the United States. It's roughly the size of Rhode Island. He bought the ranch, and he wrote himself into the script. So now if you think about it, the man is acting and getting paid for it. He's writing and getting paid for it. He's directing and getting paid for it. He owns the property that they're filming on and is getting paid for it. And he knows all the actors because he's worked with them in the past. He's a genius.
Yeah, that's actually incredible when you line it up like that and you realize that he set himself up to really have multiple revenue streams on one project, which is incredible.
Exactly. You know, and
That's
then
like what Adam Sandler and, you know, a lot of these, like, because Happy Gilmore's a similar setup. Most of his movies he directs and then he acts in them.
and he brings along
Yeah,
actors
yep,
with him.
exactly. And not to mention, he's using the budgets to go on big vacations with his friends, you know? That's
Exactly.
all of his movies, you know? And I
Exactly.
think that's why we all like it in a way, because when you watch an Adam Sandler movie, you really step into wherever he is, because whatever he's doing, he's really doing it. Like,
Yep.
you know, you look back at Happy Gilmore, he's just golfing with his buddies.
Yeah.
You know? And
Bob Barker.
and that's why you love it, because you're like, I could be there, you know?
Right.
But that's really cool. So, you know, I wanted to talk also a little bit about, you know, your process when you sit down. Like, where do you draw from as far as coming to the stories you come up with? You know, are you an outline kind of guy, or do you like to go in order, page to page, or do you like to write the ending first? You know, I think a lot of artists and writers have their own process, so I'm curious what yours is.
Yeah. Well, my initial step is to come up with some kind of concept.
Yep.
And that concept can be something as simple as a title.
Mm-hmm.
Bob the Builder
Yep.
was strictly a title. And then I start writing. I start on page 1, and I have no clue how it's going to come out. I don't know the ending of any movie that I've ever written except for one, which is the one that I'm working on right now. And it's kind of like going on a ride out in the country.
Yeah, it's almost like you're writing from the perspective that viewers will watch.
Yeah, you know,
And that's a pretty cool way to do it, I think, because then when you put a plot twist in, you're even surprised when you're writing it. You're like,
exactly.
oh, that's cool. That's a cool twist, you know?
And I actually do that. I'll be writing. I'll be like, oh, what if I did that? Yeah, let's do that.
No, absolutely.
And then you see where that takes your character, and then you got to kind of go in and save them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I don't know, it's cool to hear that that's how you go, because I would almost think in some of them that you did think of the ending first, because the endings seem to be well orchestrated. Like, you do a good job at coming to these, whether it's heartwarming, and like when we did that first one, Passion. Like, I think the way you wrote this script of having, you know, the main character walk out at the end, and like the parents on the door, and you had that shot. I think that whole thing came together in a way that, you know, somebody that's not a writer would assume that you knew how the ending was right when you made it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas, you know, going back and finding out that that's your structure, it's pretty cool. Yeah. So, you know, talking about like that, you know, the process of writing. I know a lot of writers are big on putting similar themes and or motifs into their stories. You know, if you look at a Quentin Tarantino movie, they almost always have a similar arc of some sort, you know.
Right.
It's the hero arc of some kind, or it could be the anti-heroes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, he always kind of, you know, especially even aesthetically, he follows that, you know, big gruesome gore, and like,
Right.
so like, do you have any like theme or motif that really sticks out to you that you like to talk about?
No, I do like exploring the darker side of people.
Yeah.
Well,
because I've noticed in a few of your films, you know, it does seem like you talk a lot about inner things that people are working through in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it seems to go to for you, and like somebody comes along and either is pushing against that inner thing you've got going on, or trying to pull you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the first film I saw you did, I can't remember what the name of it was. It had Phil in it.
Camp Out.
Yep. That one, I remember seeing, and I was like, wow, this is really good. And it seemed to have that darker, you know, it was a suicide, you know? And it's similar to the one we're doing this weekend. We're actually going to be filming.
Right.
But by the time this episode comes out, that will probably be out, I'm assuming.
I would hope so.
Yeah, so, you know, I noticed that you kind of have that theme of, like, people at their low.
Right.
And I don't know if is there something, like, and if you don't feel comfortable talking about it either, but I'm curious if there's, like, a personal experience that came from that you ended up, you know, adding these stories, adding these things into the stories, you know?
Well, a lot of people, most people won't know, but I'm a 3-time suicide survivor. I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder while I was in the military, and I went to a dark place a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Fun thing about PTSD is you never know when you're going to get triggered.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I guess it's it's not me trying to explain it to people so much as, most people will tell you, write what you know.
Yeah.
You know, I know the dark side. I've been there. I've been in that hole. And
Luke, I am your father.
yeah, exactly. So it's easy for me to write those kind of characters. The one that's got the gun to his head and, really thinking about, well, nobody needs me anyways. I'll just pull the trigger. But yeah.
Well, I think, to me that kind of like gives me a little insight into your stories too, and makes me like them even more because, like you said, it's from a real place, and the realest things are the best things to put into a film, especially nowadays you see so much romanticization in film of like all kinds of things, and you painting that picture of people actually in their real low state. I think those kinds of films can actually be really uplifting for people. Obviously Camp Out had a little darker of an ending, but I won't spoil it. Then again, it'll be out already. But this one we've got coming up has a little bit more of a positive turnaround, which I like to see for you as my friend,
Absolutely.
Because that shows to me, too, like, I don't know where you were at when you made Camp Out, but wherever you were at, no matter, like, and back to the fact that, it doesn't matter what age you are. You can be 50 and have a really traumatic experience and be dealing with that. And then by 54, you might be a completely different person, even if it's only the difference between 50 and 54. So it's like seeing where you were at then, do you feel like you're in a different place now when you've come to the writing a point in time?
Absolutely. Yeah. I am in a much better place, and I owe two things to that. My wife and my dog.
Awesome.
My wife has been with me through my darkest times.
How long you guys been married?
20 years. 22 years.
Oh, I'll cut out that you forgot for a second. I'm just playing.
She won't watch this anyways.
No, but...
yeah, 22 years.
So what's your secret? How'd you guys make that kindle?
We connect on so many levels. It's crazy. If you watch us when we're in the kitchen, neither one of us says a word, but we know what the next thing to do is to help the other person. So we have this dance when we're in the kitchen. She pulls the cups down out of the kitchen cabinet. I get the coffee and start filling up the cup. She goes and gets the creamer to put in the coffee. I get the sugar and I put those in the cups. And it's just the way that we work. Everything clicks with her. 4 years ago now, 5 years ago was my last suicide attempt. And afterwards, we were watching TV and they had a commercial on, I think it was Wounded Warrior Project. And they were talking about service dogs. And she said, "Would you like a service dog?" And I thought for a second, I said, yeah, I would. And at that time, I couldn't leave my house. Writing was the furthest thing from my mind.
Crippled, yeah.
I was completely crippled, yeah. And I contacted this operation out of Massachusetts, Operation Delta Dog. And they brought me up there. They introduced me to Sissy, and we've been together ever since. And I owe it to that dog that I could leave the house.
That's awesome.
And it's not just necessarily having a service dog, but having a dog kind of makes certain requirements upon you. Well, the dog needs to be walked. The dog needs to be fed. So having a routine like that helps when you're in a depressed mood.
Yeah.
So having her for that, and then having her abilities that she has to wake me from my nightmares, to know when I'm stressing.
Yeah. And not to mention, obviously, like, there's a lot of captivating science that's been coming out over the last 20 years about, just petting a dog raises serotonin levels.
Yeah.
And when you raise your serotonin levels, your aggression goes down and you become more relaxed and happy. And that can especially be attributed to, like, if your PTSD was the initial cause of the stress that you were dealing with that led to depression and, your suicidal thoughts or whatever, it was the dog that, gave you that. And I love that. It's like a movie, you know what I mean? And maybe that would be a cool movie to make too. You know, if you go down these stories anyways, you're always, you know, kind of coming to these darker stories. A darker story with that nice ending of like a dog. And I think a lot of people love dogs, you know, so
Yep.
look at Marley and Me, the box office hit. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
dog movies usually resonate, and not to mention a dog movie that's about a man's struggle with his inner conflict
Yeah.
and the dog and how the dog can come in and, you know, provide relief. I think some movies touch on those themes, but not directly in the way that, you know, what your experience was, where the dog literally pulled you from suicide, you
Right.
know? Whereas, like, I could name, like, obviously, like, the movie I Am Legend, where Will Smith kind of has a similar theme. You know, he's alone in the world, and his dog
Except
is
for
all
his
he's
dog,
got.
yep.
And, you know, so it's a similar thing. And maybe throughout the storyline, the dog prevents him, but for different circumstances. Obviously, the world ended.
Yeah.
So for you, your world maybe felt like it was ending. You know, the
Mhm.
world around you was continuing to turn. At least, like, I'm obviously, like, you probably, I think you saw the post that I put up earlier myself that, you know, I'm a suicide survivor as well, and or suicide attempt survivor, I guess. So it's like I can kind of relate to you on that inner conflict a little, and like, you know, so I think it's cool that we're having this conversation because a lot of people are afraid to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And it's necessary to talk about because when you say something, now I feel comfortable to say it.
Yeah.
And when I feel comfortable to say it and you feel comfortable to say it, now we have common ground.
Right.
And more people have put themselves in a situation where they were trying to kill themselves or harm themselves than will care to admit.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it, too. Like, you can't tell somebody, hey, you have to. Like, that's why when I mentioned it, I didn't want to, like, push you to say anything if you didn't feel comfortable. But, you know, encouraging people to feel like they can be in a safe place to have a conversation like that is really valuable, and it saves lives.
You know, I'm not big with the woke society
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in today's society. But I will say that it's making it easier for people to come out and talk about things.
Yeah.
You know, 10 years ago, there was no way I was going to tell anybody that I had tried to kill myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but now it seems like it's easier. It's not a badge of courage that you wave around. It's just letting people know, hey, this is who I am because of this is what happened.
Yeah. No, and it's I agree. It's not a badge of courage. It's more so, I think for me, the reason I even put up the post I put up today is because, like, you know, when you don't say something, anything, you end up being the sole holder.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for example, like when my father passed, I didn't really do a lot of crying because
Right.
I was retaining those emotions because I didn't want anybody else to feel that too. But then as I grew and I realized other people won't feel what I feel if I tell them about it.
Right.
They'll maybe be able to empathize, and, you know, that's not necessarily what you're seeking, but if they do it and it's natural, then there's nothing wrong with empathy,
Right.
you know? If somebody wants to empathize for you because you went through a traumatic experience or a loss, it shouldn't feel like, oh, you don't feel bad for me. Just let it be. If that's who the person is and they're caring and they're empathizing, that's a good thing, I think, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
But, well, so, you know, I'm really glad we talked about that. That's like a super, you know, touchy subject, I think, for a lot of people. So really appreciate you being open about that. You know, so going back into talking about film, obviously,
Yeah, absolutely.
we've got this upcoming project, but I'd love to hear some more about some of your other projects that you're working on. We've got a point in time that we're working on this weekend, but do you have any other ones planned that are next after that one that you're trying to hit on?
Well, I've got two other shorts sort of in the works. One has a definite Rain Man feel to it.
Okay.
And then I want to try and delve into horror. Again, horror is one that I've never written before, so I've got an idea and I want to try and play with. And
So now, obviously, I don't want you to give away your whole story and your whole plot, but this one that is about, like, is it, like you said, it's similar to Rain Man, so how so? How is it similar to Rain Man?
think Rain Man, but instead of numbers, put in acting.
Oh, okay. So the person is, like, hyper-focused on and really good at acting.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's a cool concept.
But it's the reveal that's special.
Did you ever do any acting yourself?
The only acting I ever did was when I was helping T. You know, someone has to read the other lines.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to be the guy that sits there and just kind of reads through the lines. I wanted to be able to interact with him as much as possible. So I started learning the lines and starting to figure out how I would deliver the lines. So yeah, I've done that kind of acting, but I haven't act unless you count fourth grade.
Okay,
I
okay.
was the star of this school play.
So now, why? Why haven't you? Is there anything that's like you just not a fan of being in front of the audience, or is it you don't feel it like? Because obviously, I think you could be a good actor. You know you're a good director, and I think the best directors could be great actors if they were to put themselves out there. So like, why have you? Why do you think you never stepped into that kind of a role?
Well, actually, I think it's a next step for me is to try acting
Nice.
because whatever when I read, I read about people that say actors should write so they understand the writing process, and writers should act so they understand the acting process. I think doing some acting is going to help me become a better writer.
Yeah, and especially because that's really good point. A really good point to make because I think sometimes writers write very flat and they don't understand necessarily how an actor is going to interpret those words.
Right.
For example, we were talking about the script for a point in time and how as you were writing, you had a lot of those I, you, like where you put two words side by side and have them with a pause in between.
Right.
And so as the writer, when you're looking at it and you're writing it, you're like, oh, this is great. This makes sense. But then when the actor gets the script, they might just change it to just a longer I or a longer drawn out you instead, just so it feels more natural and real and how somebody would actually say it. But when you're writing, you're just thinking about what's the story and how's the story coming out and how are the characters thinking, maybe you're thinking.
Right.
But you're not really thinking of how these characters are actually going to say it or exactly how they're really going to say it, I should say.
Right.
Because you might have an idea, I want them to say it like this. But then the actor will get the script and they're going to interpret it. And you're going to have to work with their interpretation as a director to come to either the closest thing to what you originally thought of or the best middle ground,
I don't even look for that. I look for what is the best solution.
Best solution.
If you want to take my writing and throw it out and say completely different lines, but they fit the story, let's do it.
Yeah.
Or if you want to take and go exactly as my dialogue is written and ask me how I would do the inflections on that dialogue, that's fine. It's more important about the end of the journey. Do we get a good product at the end of the journey?
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I was actually just watching, I watched this show on YouTube called The Corridor Crew. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No, I haven't seen it.
They're basically this group of guys that make all kinds of videos teaching about special effects, and then they have special effects artists come on and sit down and talk about films. But they had an episode like a year ago that came out, I think, that had Seth Rogen on it. Because Seth Rogen, a lot of people don't know, but he does a lot of things with especially practical effects. He's like big on practical effects. Like there's a scene in one of his movies, I can't name of the movie, it's bugging me. But there's a movie that he did where they used a dummy and then they just did a quick cut and replaced him with the dummy on the way down. But the way that it would have looked way worse if they did it with CGI.
Right.
It just looked way more authentic and real. But back on the original idea of that, Seth Rogen was talking about how in their movies they'll typically do two versions. They'll do a bunch of takes of two different versions. So one is they'll follow the script to a T.
Right.
And they do as many takes as it takes to get the right take with the script lines. And then they do takes where they allow them to improvise.
Just wing it. Throw it out there.
And he said that typically they end up going with the stuff that's improvised. Because it's more natural and more authentic.
That's what we did at the table read. I just told the guys, if you come up with something different that you think is funny, say it.
And this is the table read for the movie that we're working on, the point in time for anybody, because you were just telling me about that before we started the podcast. But yeah, that's cool. I hope that we should do that almost. Maybe when we're shooting it, we could do it like they do. Shoot with the exact script, and then do some takes where we kind of have fun and see what happens. What comes of just letting nature take course. So that's really cool. So we've gotten a good insight on, who you are as a person and, your craft as a filmmaker and a little bit of the inner workings of Chris Goodenough. But I'd love to know, too, a little bit about your time in the Coast Guard. Yeah, so tell me, do you have any, funny or interesting, maybe not funny, cool stories from the Coast Guard?
Well, I can tell you some of the reasons I have PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was stationed up in Kodiak, Alaska, which, if you've never been to Alaska, you have to go because it's the most beautiful place in the world,
Hmm.
um, unless you're a medic. Kodiak, Alaska is the size of Connecticut. When I was up there, it had 24 miles of paved road. Everything else was dirt, and it had one blinking light in the middle of town. It was just this little hole in the wall.
Hmm.
I was a medic or a corpsman in the Coast Guard, and we would respond to anything that was on the dirt roads because we had a four-wheel drive ambulance. We had a couple occasions. One was two guys went out hunting with 22 rifles. They were going rabbit hunting, and they walked in between a mama Kodiak bear and her cub. Mama Kodiak bears range somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 pounds, and
Wow.
they are just killing machines. Well, one guy took off running, and that saved his life because his partner dropped to one knee, aimed his 22 rifle at a Kodiak bear, and shot at it.
A 22 too. You're not
It
winning that battle.
it succeeded in pissing the bear off,
Mm.
and the bear literally tore him to pieces.
Oh my God.
Picture a football field, and this body was smeared across this football field.
Ugh.
We were walking around. I picked up an ear and put it in a little plastic baggie, and this is what we did. We just went around, picked up body pieces. Um, there was another case where we had a Coast Guard helicopter crash into the side of a mountain, and the helicopter burst into flames, and we had to go out and recover the charred remains and
Wow.
take pictures of the dead bodies. Um, so yeah, that was my time in the Coast Guard.
I had no idea that that kind of stuff was even being done by the Coast Guard. It makes sense, obviously, because, they do all kinds of stuff like on land, pretty much similar to the National Guard, but instead their focus is like rescue and missions like that, correct?
hmm
So, but I never would have thought of situations like that. And now it almost makes me, looking back, I wish I didn't say, oh, tell me a funny story. Because to be honest, what I was expecting is, a lot of people, like, for example, your buddy Ryan that I had met, he was telling me stories about the guys and like what life was in the quarters in the submarine. So, that's kind of what I was originally thinking where this could potentially go. But now knowing that, like, wow, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, if you've never done CPR on a 3-year-old, it's tough. And back then, I can't put any blame and say, well, the Coast Guard screwed me up,
Hmm.
because back then, back in the early 80s, they didn't know anything about post-traumatic stress disorder. They didn't know anything about battle fatigue or
Well, not long
shell
before the
shock.
80s, they were telling people that Agent Orange was just to stop the crops.
Right.
They weren't telling them, oh, it's going to probably cause cancer or, cause you to not be able to have children or all kinds of things that could happen from Agent Orange. So it doesn't surprise me that maybe even if they were aware that PTSD was a thing, that they weren't telling you guys, hey, this could be a thing that happens to you later in life.
Well, the way the Coast Guard is structured, we are a very small
Mhm.
organization. There are more people at Staples Stadium up in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
I think it's called. There are more people there for a football game than there are in the entire Coast Guard.
Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it was that small either.
Yeah, there's only about 35,000 people in the Coast Guard.
So then, 35,000. So there's what, a couple hundred in each state. Then not that many really.
Maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're on a boat or something like that.
Mhm.
But like, I was stationed in New York City, and it's not you are an emergency medical technician, and this guy is a billing specialist. You're both. So I'm sitting at my desk doing medical bills for a lady that's sitting out in the waiting room, and we get a call to go for a guy that's having a heart attack. So we go out on, the ambulance goes running over to this building. We go in there and we're doing CPR on him. Doctor shows up. Doctor pronounces him dead. we go back. I walk back into my office, and the lady says, "What's going on with my bills?"
Mm.
It's that little switch you have to throw to go from, I was just doing CPR on a dead guy, to, let me check on your bill for you.
Man.
There was no kind of counseling afterwards for this.
They're just
You
like,
know,
here, you went through this. Now we need you to go file some
yeah,
paperwork.
yeah, no,
That's
go do the
incredible.
paperwork.
Oof.
You know,
It's almost dehumanizing. Not necessarily even 100% for you. For you, it's dehumanizing a little because they're not giving you the counseling, but it's also dehumanizing the things you're seeing. You know, you're seeing these people going through these crazy traumatic things, and then you're being put in an office.
do you remember the bear scene in The Revenant?
Yes.
I cannot watch it.
Oh, my
because
God.
of
I can barely watch it, and I've never seen anything like that, so I can imagine. That's a brutal scene in cinematography.
yeah.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
I,
And now you telling me that
I was
makes it
watching
even
The
more real.
Revenant, and I didn't know this bear scene was
Oh.
in there, and I saw it, and I was just like, I shut down. I just
No.
walked over, sat in my chair,
And it's
didn't say a
tricky
word.
because you have to, you know, from a cinematographer's perspective, you watch the scene and it's like, wow,
Yeah,
this is incredible.
yeah.
But from somebody who's really experienced something like that, it's like, no, you don't want to see that. Yeah. Ah, man, that's something else, man.
Yeah. So, like I said, I have plenty of dark side to go to when I'm doing my dark writing.
hmm No, exactly. Like when you pull from a real place too. Like I said, you get a real thing, and that's very real stuff to go through. I
Yeah.
could not imagine like what was on your mind. So, you know, backtracking. What was the thing that got you interested in the Coast Guard, and what made you want to do that?
I have stupid friends. Yeah. I was 18 years old, and my buddy went down and joined the Coast Guard. He said, "You should join the Coast Guard." I said, "What the hell's the Coast Guard?" So I went down and I talked with a recruiter. He says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do art." Because back then I was big into art, drawing comic books and
Yep.
doing stuff like that. I said, "I want to do something that's art." He says, "Well, we don't have art, but we have photojournalism, where you can be a reporter, basically."
And another field that's kind of like what you said. You know, you see things and then you have to go
Yeah.
file paperwork.
I said, "Okay, let me do that." And I went to boot camp, and I said, "Well, my recruiter said I was going to be a photojournalist." And they said, "No." They said,
Wow.
"Here's a list of things you can choose from." I said, "What's a corpsman?" It's like, kind of like a nurse. Okay, I could do that.
Mm.
So,
Definitely sounds different than a nurse.
yeah.
Because, you know, that was something like I was thinking is like, where is that defining difference between a paramedic and what you did, you know? But there's a big difference, I think, in a lot of ways. Granted, paramedics, not to downplay, they see some horrible things too, but
Mhm.
I can imagine that there's probably more often you see super grotesque things when you're going to find people that are lost in the woods,
Mhm.
or when you find somebody that's, you know, hanging from a, like that movie. Did you ever see that movie 72 Hours? It's got James Franco in it. I think that's
No.
what it's called, 72 Hours. Might be 100 something hours. I don't know, but it's
It's some hours.
it's some number of hours, and he basically is a guy that was hiking in a canyon. I want to say the Grand Canyon, but he's hiking in a canyon.
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah. And he ends up
he, like,
having to cut his
falls.
arm off.
Yeah, he like falls and he gets stuck and he has to cut his own arm off. Yeah, I think it is the arm, and just to get out. And I can imagine what the guys that came to that scene, because that's based on a true story, what they went through after. You know,
Mhm.
like seeing a man. Not only, you know, they probably were horrified and inspired at the same time. You know,
Yeah.
because you see this guy that's got true human resilience, and like he pushes himself through that. He's willing to cut his own limb off
Yeah.
to escape, and they find him with bloodied arm, and it's like that's got to be like something I could not imagine. Just
Yeah.
could not. Oof. But you know, we've gone down pretty dark territory here, and you know, I'd love to talk. You know, before we finish up, you know, I want to go back to like your main message now that people know you a little bit more, and how you want to make our area, you know, a video production destination site is what you said to me. And, you know, I'd love it if you kind of delved into that a little bit more. And now that we have the nuance of Chris Goodenough, you know, we can really understand why, you know, going along, like not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. You know, so Tell me a little bit about like how you plan to make our area like a video production destination site.
Well, I think it all starts with the people.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are in video production, whether they're actors, writers, producers, directors, if they're local, let's get together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have lunch sometime and talk about our ideas and talk about how we can help each other.
Much like how we met. I think I just went to meet you for breakfast one day, and
Yeah.
we chopped it up, and then I was in a couple of your shorts, and we
Yep.
ended up going from there, so it's cool.
And there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, just start with the people. Once you have that, then you can start building that entourage, kind of like Taylor Sheridan did.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that level, then you can say, okay, I'm bringing you on board. I know you can act. You don't have to audition for me. You're going to be in this role because it fits your character. And by the way, here's $10,000 for doing the role. Because as you build your network,
Am I getting paid $10,000 for this upcoming film?
Absolutely not. But that's the kind of goal I want to get to, where I can take this entourage of camera guys and sound guys and actors and, makeup guys and put them all in a room and say, okay, let's make a movie. I've just talked to a half dozen executive producers who are all coming on board for this. They've seen what we can do. They believe in our product. They're going to give us money. Now we can start paying people.
And now another way that I noticed that it seems that you've started to establish, what's the word? Well, just establish yourself. I noticed that you submit to a lot of these festivals and get reviewed. Now, I'm curious because I think there's a lot of young filmmakers that either are intimidated by that or don't know where to go. So I'm wondering if maybe you could give some insight on how you've gone about entering either your films or your scripts into these festivals.
Yeah, sure. I won't talk about entering films into festivals because I haven't had any experience. I enter my scripts.
Yep, your scripts, gotcha.
And one of the things I will say right off the bat is if you're a screenwriter or a script writer, get your stuff out there. Mm-hmm. Get people to read it. Be careful when you go into film festivals because there are a lot of film festivals that just want your money. Mm-hmm. So do your homework. Find the top 12 film festivals that really give your script attention and enter those. I say that because I made those mistakes. Mm-hmm. I entered into film festivals that were monthly. They were online. All they wanted was $50 for your submission fee, and then they would send you a one-page interpretation of your script. And I got a lot of one-page interpretations that talked nothing about the script that I submitted. Mm. They were completely wrong. It's like they read the first page and the last page and tried to guess at the middle.
Interesting.
So do your homework.
And you have to pay for these, right? You're
paying
to submit. So
yeah,
you got to be careful with anything you pay for. People are shisty, and you never know who's gonna. Sometimes it could be the nicest seeming person. I think in a lot of cases the best scams are when you don't even know you're being scammed.
Right.
So.
I will say this about your script: the first draft of anything is crap. Mm-hmm. Don't submit your first draft. Rewrite until you're tired of rewriting it. And then rewrite it one more time and then submit it. Because then you know that you've got probably the best product that you can put forth at that time.
Another cool thing I know a lot of people do, not even just with scripts, but with songs too, is find somebody you don't know and show them it. Mm-hmm. And if that person, or if you can find more than one person, if you can find 10 people that you don't know,
yep.
However many people, the bigger the, test group, if you will, the better option, the better, you'll be able to know that this is actually something that I can make in a really good thing. Mm-hmm. So I think not being afraid to show somebody you don't know. There's actually a kid that I know that he's a musician, and he's always going to colleges, and he's just showing his stuff. And,
yep.
Whether or not they like it or not, that's on them and on him to take their feedback and grow.
Yeah.
So...
As far as feedback, I would say that if you're going to ask for feedback, be prepared for people not to like what you've done. But at the same time, stick to your guns.
Yeah,
on
because
what
not
you
all
write.
criticism is right.
Right.
Sometimes, that's why I say the bigger test group will get you a more concise, accurate read. Whereas, if you show one stranger, you can't necessarily guarantee that one stranger is a film fanatic that's going to know all the details of what makes a great film and be able to
Right.
give you true, unadulterated feedback that actually works, So I think, but yeah, I think we're going to get wrapped up here. But Chris, I really appreciate you being
Hey.
on, man. And
Yeah, had a
I
ball.
really enjoyed this conversation. Where can people find you?
Well, you can go to Facebook and look me up either personally, Chris Goodenough, or you can look up our business page, Outtake Pictures. That's probably the best place to get to because I'm an old guy and I do Facebook.
Yep.
I don't do TikTok. I don't do Instagram. I don't do.
You did give us a TikTok link, though.
I did.
You guys are uploading
And
some
the reason
of the
I say
shorts.
I don't is because I have somebody that does do.
Yep, David Tor, right?
Yep, Dave Tor does this
So
for
shout
me.
out David Tor for putting together the Outtake Pictures TikTok, and he run the Instagram too for you guys?
He does.
That's awesome. So it's good, like you've talked about in this episode a lot, is the network you've built and the people around you. And I see David is really a good guy on your team. He seems like he's really there for you and this company. So
He's part of the entourage. He's going to be going with us when we grow big.
absolutely, that's awesome. Well, Chris, we're gonna wrap up, but thanks again, man. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Hey, it was a ball.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the Ello Vizion Experience. I really appreciate you guys for being here to support these awesome people and their stories. If you do like content like this, please do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit the bells for notification because we got plenty more episodes coming at you only here on the Ello Vizion Experience.